I took the research and basically cut the forecast in half. No one would speak before Roger spoke. Looked me in the eye and said, Warren, Japanese don't know how to make luxury cars. If you're going to take the time and the effort to listen and understand what the customer says, pay attention to it. And if there was anybody who knew how to evaluate the interior of a vehicle that I've run into in my career, is Bob Lutz.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars with my dear friend Warren Browne, came to reveal deeper secrets, or more concisely, deeper secrets revealed. I'm so excited to have you back, Warren. I'm going to look at my notes, and I don't know where I want to start, but I don't know. Don't spend all the money on market research and then ignore it.
You have to go all the way back to 1984. The whole industry was facing intense fuel economy standard pressure. And I think that they were more nervous back then than they were during the announcement of the Obama standards, because this was kind of like the first time after the two energy crises that the government was really getting serious about high fuel economy standards. And the solution, or at least the proposed solution by engineers, was, we were going to downsize everything and make everything smaller. That was the soup du jour at the time. Engineers got a little smarter as they tried to grapple with Obama standards, but that'll be for another day. So it was all about downsizing, and the biggest fear was that they would have to downsize Cadillacs and big Buicks and big Oldsmobiles, because we were making an awful lot of money then on each one, okay? And so I had the unique position that I was not only responsible for doing the forecast of the next generation of vehicles, but they also commissioned me to do the market research. And it was the first time General Motors had actually spent $1 million on a piece of market research. That was a big deal back in 1984, right? 2 cities. We went to Dallas, Texas, and Sacramento, California. So you can imagine the logistics, the cost, hauling all of these future, fiberglass clay models around, and, getting a herd of people to come in and evaluate them, which we did. And the whole thing, from Dallas to Sacramento probably lasted about a month to get it all done, get it all organized. But one of the things that was very interesting at the time is we were having people do a little bit of test drives of new engines, and we're doing that at the Dallas airport. You could do stuff like that at that time in 1984. And I had the opportunity to park what was then the new Buick Park Avenue outside of the front of the Dallas Hilton Hotel at the airport. And I just walked across the street and just watched. Nobody stopped to look at the car. No one. It was just another car sitting in front of the airport hotel. That was the first leading indicator for me. Okay. And so that was, it didn't cost me $1 million to park that car in front of the Dallas airport. So we got it all done and we brought it all back, not to my surprise, but to the surprise of many, which I'll get into. Only 5% of the people that we surveyed, because we don't put badges on the vehicles. This is all done without badges, without hood ornaments, without anything, right? So 5% of the people in the research said that was a Cadillac. 5%. Not too many more said that they would buy the vehicle given the specifications we gave them. Now, for perspective, the total amount of sales for the vehicles at that time, for the Eldorado, the Seville, the Riviera, and the Toronado, It was round numbers, 175,000 units. And we made a lot of money on each unit. Okay, that paid the bills, right? Today, the pickups pay the bills, but then those were paying the bills. And so I took the research and basically cut the forecast in half, 75,000. Now, I'll fast forward you. It actually turned out to be worse than that. So I brought the forecast into my boss, and he says, well, what is this? He says, you only got 75,000 units here. And he said, what? We got to take this to management. What rationale are we going to give them for cutting the forecast in half? And I said, well, how about the $1 million worth of market research that we just have done? He says, no, this is not going to be good. Prepare the presentation, but you can't go. You can't give it because you'll be slaughtered. He already knew you'll be slaughtered if you give this. But you can come and sit in the back. Okay. So I did that, and we're in a meeting, and what I want you to imagine is a dais with Roger Smith and Howard Carroll and Jim McDonald and probably, I don't know, whoever was the CFO at the time, right, all sitting there. And my boss puts on the presentation that I wrote for him, and no one would speak before Roger spoke. So Roger said, well, Howard, what do you think of the results? And Howard said, Roger, this is the most unprofessional piece of market research I've seen in the history of General Motors. And Roger said, are you sure you're not shooting the messenger? He said, no, Roger. Customers will get used to the car. Okay, and plus we have no choice.
I don't know Roger Smith. I only know of Roger Smith and have read books by executives. And that's interesting to me that he said, are you sure you're not shooting the messenger, that he was potentially that insightful?
No, look, you got to understand, this set of vehicles, they were paying the bills. He understood that, okay? Nevertheless, they went through with the program. They didn't believe that the Japanese were ever going to make luxury cars. As a matter of fact, the head of the program at the time looked me in the eye and said, Warren, Japanese don't know how to make luxury cars, and so we don't have to worry about them.
So we're pre-Acura, we're pre-Lexus, we're pre-Infiniti. What was Sterling? English with a Acura engine or something?
This was certainly before Acura, because Deep Secrets revealed I helped Honda actually do that program when I left General Motors. Anyways, so it was very tense. It was very difficult, especially during the time. This again is like mid 1984. The program was about a year and a half away. They knew that this was going to be a disaster. Okay, and unfortunately, the customer or the respondents at the research said the car was too wide, meaning it was too wide for its length. The proportions, Lutz would say it this way: the proportions were bad. It gave the wrong impression of the proportions. Well, that being said, that wasn't going to stop Cadillac from cutting the vehicle open and making it even wider so that they could put their V8 engine in it, which made the vehicle worse. So fast forward, sales weren't good. I think it fundamentally was one of those historical steps that put a kink in Cadillac's armor. There were many others to follow, but that was a real big kink that I observed close at hand. It was, you'd throw the Cimarron in the same category, the Chevrolet Cavalier that had lipstick put on it and called the Cimarron from Cadillac, which was also a disaster, or the Elante, etc. But it was the first big kink, and it really mattered. Now, that whole program and the difficulty with that program set in place a whole internal audit system inside General Motors which I helped write a piece of it that had to do with the market research, to at least have a higher visibility of the output of market research at a much earlier stage. Okay? Because it wasn't good. Now, you fast forward to 2002, and Bob Lutz came on board and basically said, doing product programs, you got to do them from the gut, right? All that market research is BS. Car guys need to make cars. Okay. I don't necessarily agree to that. I think customers can tell you way in advance whether the proportions are good and whether there's value in what it is that they see. And clearly in the research that we did, there wasn't value. Now, on the day that he retired, Howard Carroll wrote a note to the board, which still hangs in my old boss's office in Capitola, California. And that note essentially said what we did on the 1986 EK program was probably criminal, meaning we hurt the company by doing this. This was the same guy who told Roger, the customer will just get used to it. Okay? They'll just get used to it. So what was the lesson for me? Do I believe that market research is perfect? No. But if you're going to do it, if you're going to take the time and the effort to listen and understand what the customer says, pay attention to it.
So when Howard Carroll, vice chairman of General Motors, says, don't worry, they'll get used to it. This is an old General Motors culture, really, isn't it?
I think that the folk like Mark Royce, Mary, that are there today clearly understand. And as a matter of fact, there was a piece in the news just the other day that the chief engineer said, we're going to have to demonstrate to the customer that there really is value in electric vehicles. That's our job, to explain that and why it's there. No, I think that it was the old GM. It was the GM that went bankrupt. You can trace the seeds back to, and I submit, back to that first big kink in Cadillac's armor and the hubris that said Japanese don't know how to make luxury cars, when we knew that they were already doing vehicles of that type and selling them in Japan. That was hubris. That was total hubris that ultimately they paid the price for. I wasn't really clear on the research. The research not only tested the Eldorado Seville, they also tested what was then known as the C-body cars, the Park Avenue, the 98. So it was a whole system of luxury cars that needed to be downsized in order to meet the standards. So that's why the Park Ave was there. It was a simultaneous test of both of them. Now all you got to do is do a picture of the 84 and a picture of the 86 side by side, and you'll see. What I think was that the external styling and dimensions, and the look and the brand character of the vehicle, they relied upon that so much that the features and performance of the vehicle almost took a back seat. I mean, there was nothing that dramatically new in the 86, as I recall it, that was in the 84. So here you weren't offering anything on the interior that was maybe offsetting some of the exterior shrinkage that you had to do to make those cars successful in terms of cafe standards. It hurt. And so, this morning I went back and looked at the sales just to be sure that because I did a small piece for Ward's back about 6 or 7 years ago on this. And sure enough, the sales were cut in half. It was horrible. And I said internally at the time, after I had gone overseas, etc., the press will never know this. This is why it's deep secrets revealed. But this would make the Edsel pale by comparison.
But I don't remember, riding in those cars, and I rode in a few of those cars, Cadillacs, Buicks, Oldsmobile. I was amazed by how similar in size the interior felt. So I think part of it was just an engineering problem, putting the package together with what they had at the time. When you say the CTS and XTS cars now would seem smaller than that car, also the what is it, EK?
In 1986, it was called the EK platform. Today, they got a whole new series of acronym. Yeah.
Okay, but the Cadillac got smaller in the late 80s when GM cars got smaller in the late 80s. They were competing with the prior size. Now, Cadillac, for example, their target's BMW.
And therefore, the package has to be tighter. The performance has to be better. The features have to be interesting, especially as we're moving into electric vehicles. You know, I saw the Kia EV6 last night on the Emmy Awards. I don't know if you saw that. Phenomenal looking car. Looks. It's an eye grabber. And I had an opportunity to test drive a Polestar sedan, which they delivered to my house to test drive. It's a rocket ship, but the features and the look, I had an opportunity, a great opportunity to be at a couple of events with Lutz. And if there was anybody who knew how to evaluate the interior of a vehicle that I've run into in my career, is Bob Lutz. Okay, he could sit in the car, turn the dials, do the switches, point out the 9 different ugly black. He says, Warren, see, this car has 9 different blacks on the inside. It's never gonna work with luxury customers. It's not sophisticated enough. He says, turn this dial, and I'll turn that dial. See how that one feels? You know, one was like turning one of the old Sansui tuners on a stereo system. The other was, clunk, clunk, clunk. So the whole sophistication of the vehicle in that segment has changed. And size is important, but only to the interiors, only to the people sitting in the vehicle, right? There's no longer the prestige of, I've got the longest car on the block. It's just not there. And so I think you're right. From 84 to 86, that perception of what made brand equity then hurt Cadillac. It wouldn't matter today.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.